warfare, the deaths, were just horrific. In 1916, the British were, in one day of battle, the Battle of the Somme, they lost what we historians say were 100,000 people killed in one day. I imagine the British were pretty desperate because they were losing that war in 1916. So the Zionists came to them and they said, we can help you win this war. We can help get the United States, which has not yet taken a side on this war, because in the United States people did not want to take a side. These are so-called isolationists. These are people that did not want to join a European war. Americans at that time, many were of English extraction, many were of German extraction. You know, they were evenly divided as far as that goes, and people did not want to join World War I. That's why Woodrow Wilson was elected on the slogan, "He kept us out of the war." So the American public did not want to join the war, but potentially could be a significant factor in the war. The Germans wanted us on their side, the British wanted us on their side. Well, the Zionists went to Britain and they said, we can help get the Americans on your side. And they decided to send a memo to, they sent a memo to Brandeis on this. This information I'm giving you actually comes from several different books, some of which have exactly the same quotes, some have quotes that one doesn't have, and some have quotes the other doesn't have. So it's confirmed from several sources that this was done. Now, am I saying that Zionists got America into World War I?
Yes.
What I'm saying is that they may have. Clearly, I feel now, I'd never even heard this in any of my history classes, that they were a factor. And as I'll show you, they claim they were the decisive factor. And the British, in their very careful way, say the same thing. Now, I'm not a historian. I haven't studied World War I and the lead up to it in enough detail to know if they were, yes, they were a factor, but it wasn't the most important one. Or, yes, it was hugely significant, or it was medium. This is the kind of debate a free academic society should be having in its history departments. I don't think they are, but they should be having, and then maybe we'd have an idea. So my conclusion is, yes, they were a factor. My guess is they were a significant one. I don't know for sure if they were the decisive one, but they certainly could have been. The main thing is, I didn't even know they were a factor. And yet, we had a number of people talking about this. This is Samuel Landman, who was the secretary of the World Zionist Organization, said, quote, after an understanding had been arrived at between Sir Mark Sykes, and you've heard of his name from the Sykes-Picot agreement, Weitzman and Sokolow, or however you pronounce his name, it was resolved to send a secret message to Justice Brandeis that the British cabinet would help the Jews to gain Palestine in return for active Jewish sympathy and for support in the USA for the Allied cause, so as to bring about a radical pro-Allied tendency in the United States. So this was the trade-off to get the Balfour Declaration. They would make this promise, and then there would be this Balfour Declaration that really has no significant international significance at that time. You know, the British weren't in control of it, but it became significant later. So I won't read all of these quotes. They're in my booklet. So then, the reason it became significant is that, of course, as we now know, the British side, with now the Americans on that side, many of them dying. My aunt was widowed at a very young age because her husband died in World War I. So the British side won, and then there's the Paris Peace Conference, and at this peace conference, this is, of course, when the Middle East was divided up because the Ottoman Empire had been defeated. So they divided it up, and there were a great many Zionist groups that went and lobbied there. What we don't know, and most of us, I had never known that before, but what happened is that a lot of other people also went to lobby at the Paris Peace Conference about the Middle East, and the Christian leaders of the time lobbied against supporting Zionism. These were two of the most famous evangelical ministers of the day in the United States. They were Emerson Fosdick and Henry Sloane Coffin were very, very famous, celebrated, illustrious Christian ministers and theologians. They lobbied against Zionism. There was another man who was named Dr. Howard Bliss from the college that became the American University of Beirut. He traveled to Paris to lobby against the way they were dividing up the Middle East and against Zionism as well, because all of these people were saying, shouldn't we ask the people of the region what they want? At this time, Woodrow Wilson had enunciated the principle of self-determination of peoples. Self-determination of peoples became a major slogan at this period of time. And they were saying, yes, therefore, what about the people of the Middle East? Let us go and listen and ask them what they want to have happen. A number of the State Department, the King Crane Commission, a number of people were saying the same thing. This was from the State Department, all saying, President Wilson, your words need to be applied to the Middle East as well. But of course they weren't, because the Zionist lobby was already significantly powerful and prevented that from happening. The King Crane Commission was buried. People didn't even read about it until years later. But now, Hugh Gibson is very interesting, because again, one of the ways that the Israel lobby convinces people that they should support Zionism and a Jewish state in Palestine is sympathy for victims. And we all, I hope, have a sympathy for victims and want to help the underdog in any way that we can. So they were already, in the early, I think this was from about the 1920s, they were already very active, showing that there was so much anti-Semitism that there needed to be a homeland, a Jewish state in Palestine. And there were a lot of reports coming out about alleged anti-Semitism in Poland. We still hear often that Poland is such an anti-Semitic place. Well, it turns out that this young, brilliant, rising diplomat named Hugh Gibson was named ambassador to Poland. He went over there and he said, guess what? Good news. It's not so bad after all. There's really not very much anti-Semitism. He doesn't say there was no bigotry. Sadly, there's probably always bigotry everywhere against everyone. But he said, this is really being exaggerated. And because he said they were exclusively a foreign manufacture. By that he meant Zionists for anti-Polish purposes. In 1923, another diplomat said the same thing. Now what happened when Hugh Gibson said that, I'm near the end of my time already, what happened then is that Felix Frankfurter and Louis Brandeis, very important, prominent Americans, at that time Brandeis was already a Supreme Court justice, came to Hugh Gibson and the State Department and tried to get him fired for saying that. And he withstood it.